Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we're going to take a look at Mercury square to Saturn. Mercury is in the sign of Sagittarius, making a square to Saturn in the sign of Pisces. But we're going to be looking at this from the standpoint of the upcoming Jupiter-Saturn square that's taking place, because it turns out that Mercury is intimately involved with that upcoming square through this aspect and through several more that Mercury is going to be making. So I'm going to lay out the entirety of that sequence for us today, and then ask us to look at this Mercury-Saturn square from a slightly bigger picture, and give you some things to watch for, not only now, but as this whole process unfolds. So that is our agenda for today. Remember to like and subscribe. If you are new to the channel, welcome. We hope you enjoy the content. Also, help us grow our channel and community by liking and subscribing. We're seeing if we can get to 80,000 subscribers by the spring equinox. Transcripts of any of these daily talks can be found on my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. When you're over there, remember that this week is your final week to sign up for the first-year course, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. Starts this Saturday, November 16th. It's not too late to sign up. There is need-based tuition available at the bottom if you would like a little bit of help or assistance to make it happen because you are experiencing financial hardship, or you're on a limited or very fixed income. We understand that some people need a little bit of help, and that's just fine. We have always strived to make astrology affordable and accessible for people, no matter where they're at. On that note, you should also check out our new service, Need-Based Astrology Readings. Under Book a Reading, click on Need-Based Astrology Readings, and you will find that we have 3 tiers of readings at different prices available now from both some of our staff and some emerging talent from our alumni community. Very excited to be offering that service here. And this is, again, part of our overall mission to make sure that astrology education and services are affordable for people at different income levels. So on that note, final thing would be under the events page, click on live talks. You'll see my upcoming webinar on November 21st, Pluto in Aquarius. AI, Aliens, and New World Orders, that webinar on the 21st, you can sign up for and attend live. And if you can't make it live, there is a recording. So some big things happening this week with the new class starting, a good election for it to start under as Pluto's about to enter Aquarius. So I hope to see some of you there. After I sign off today, there's an informational video telling you more about the upcoming program if you want to learn more about it. And just remember that you have until Saturday to register. Try to get your registration in as soon as possible so we can get you set up and you can be there for that first class. Of course, you can always watch the programs, the recordings at your own pace. Everything in the class is recorded. So all right, on that note, let's turn our attention to the real-time clock, and we're going to unpack this very interesting Mercury dynamic, which is present today, which is really part of a much larger process taking place in the next month. So here today is Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius, and this Mercury square Saturn dynamic today, November 12th, is perfecting. Now that alone we could talk about, and there's lots of different things to think about with a Mercury square to Saturn. I'll make sure to cover some of those, but what I really want to show you is what's happening after this square perfects. So if we take this forward a little bit, we're going to see that the next thing that happens for Mercury is the opposition to Jupiter. So this opposition to Jupiter, you can see perfecting here November 17th into the 18th. That opposition we have explored already through the mutual reception and opposition that I talked about when I did that little meditation on 2 things can be true. And we talked at length about the fact that Mercury and Jupiter are opposite and in each other's signs, so mutual reception through opposition and detriment, an interesting combination. But what's even more interesting is that if we continue taking this forward, at the end of November, right around the 25th, Mercury will station in the sign of Sagittarius, about 22 degrees, and then turn retrograde by the 27th. At which point, then what happens is Mercury's retrograde takes it backward and into the opposition with Jupiter once more, now through retrograde. In the meantime, what is very interesting is that Jupiter, through its retrograde, is now within the 3-degree engagement with Saturn. So the Jupiter-Saturn square is forming again, and it is forming as Mercury is coming through the opposition. Let's continue on. Then we will see, after the passage of Mercury through the conjunction to the sun. Then Mercury will come out on the other side, and about December 6th will square Saturn. That's as Mars is stationing to turn retrograde as well, by the way. It's interesting. Mercury square to Saturn takes place as Mercury is continuing its retrograde, and so the square to Saturn will recur. Now, if we continue moving forward with this, Mercury will then station, and it stations to turn direct right around December 16th, at which point, what I want you to notice is that as Mercury is moving forward, now Jupiter and Saturn are within about a degree of one another, and they're square. This is important. Let's take Mercury forward. As Mercury picks up speed, now look at what's happening. As Mercury comes back into the opposition with Jupiter and the square to Saturn, the two planets, Jupiter and Saturn, are in their square again. So let's back this up just a touch, and we'll see that that square between Jupiter and Saturn occurs right about Christmas Eve. That's December 24th, that the two planets are squaring one another. And then, right as they are squaring one another, you will see that Mercury is within 3 degrees of the square to Saturn and within 3 degrees of the opposition to Jupiter. And so Mercury in direct motion will connect with both of those planets, opposition to Jupiter right around December 26th, and square to Saturn the 26th into the 27th. That's really significant because what this means is that if we track this back to our astrology for today, we are seeing Mercury enter the first square to Saturn, and then the next sequence will take it into the opposition with Jupiter, which is effectively one of a 3-part movement that will occur between Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn in a T-square. So we really, in other words, should be tracking the entirety of this cycle, and we should be starting to track it now. I'm going to give you some ideas about what to watch for and how to track it, but you should pay attention first and foremost to the whole sign houses of Sag, Gemini, and Pisces in your birth chart. You just the double-bodied signs are the mutable signs and their location by whole sign house in your birth chart. The topics of those houses will be active. The next thing to notice is that we can look at some of the dignities. For example, Mercury is in Jupiter's sign, Saturn is in Jupiter's sign, Jupiter is in Mercury's sign. And so the Mercury-Jupiter opposition, mutual reception by detriment, is now integral to the meaning of the Jupiter-Saturn square, because the Jupiter-Saturn square is hosted by a Jupiter-Mercury dynamic that is perfecting through opposition and mutual reception. And so everyone knows, for the most part, who follows astrology, that this is a year where we had a previous Jupiter-Saturn square toward the end of the summer. Now we're getting another one. And most people who, track astrology regularly are aware of that square and some of its meanings. But it can slip under the radar that the second square is occurring within an ongoing Mercury retrograde. That's really significant because it suggests that this particular square can be tracked through the movements of Mercury, that Mercury's movements, its retrograde, its square to Saturn, its opposition to Jupiter, and direct motion, retrograde motion, and back through direct motion are all going to be connected. So let's just run through this one more time with some important dates. Today is the square between Mercury and Saturn. The next is going to be our opposition on November 17th into the 18th between Mercury and Jupiter. We'll be tracking that, don't worry. Then Mercury retrogrades around the 25th, 26th of November. And then we're going to see Mercury coming back through the opposition to Jupiter right around December 4th. We will then see the square to Saturn around December 6th. And then we are going to see Mercury turn direct around the 16th, 17th of December, with Jupiter and Saturn squaring one another exactly right about Christmas Eve. And then we're going to see Mercury opposing Jupiter on the 26th, Mercury squaring Saturn on the 27th. And then the dynamic starts to separate. Now, Jupiter's direct motion will finally take place during Aquarius season when the sun trines Jupiter. And then eventually we're going to see that Jupiter and Saturn will connect again, but they're not going to do so until Jupiter actually enters the sign of the sign of Cancer, and Saturn has moved into Aries, and that's not going to happen until the spring of 2025. If you're in the southern hemisphere, of course, that would be your autumn. So there is yet one more Jupiter-Saturn square to come in it's like late May, early June, if I remember correctly. I think it's June. Let's just go through it. Yeah, so the next square will be, here's Saturn entering the sign of Aries, does so right about the end of May, and then Jupiter's going to enter Cancer early June or mid-June. There we go. The square will then take place June 15th. Okay, so anyway, it's a process that's not just happening right now to the end of the year. In other words, it has one more pass that'll come in by about the middle of June. So anyway, what I want to say about where we're at today. Few things about Saturn and Mercury and Saturn, and then 5 things to watch for given the entirety of the process, which we've marked out under these dates between now and the end of the year. So let's see here. Okay, so first things first, a Mercury square Saturn dynamic with Mercury in the superior square to Saturn is suggesting, first and foremost, that we have Mercury with the upper hand in the dynamic, which is not a bad thing, honestly. With Mercury square to Saturn, you think about themes like narrow thinking or limited thinking, or you think about kind of prohibitions or inhibitions, and Mercury with the agility, the dexterity, the cleverness, and maybe the open-mindedness to move around an obstacle, to think through a problem, to come up with a solution, to find a way of holding several things at once so that a problem is no longer a problem, to come up with a new strategy, approach, design, or idea that allows you to move around an obstacle. These are all wonderful features of Mercury in a superior square to Saturn. However, the other thing that could come up would be something like rigid or fanatical thinking with both Saturn and Mercury in a Jupiter-ruled sign. Mercury being in a fire sign, right? Sagittarius, Saturn in Pisces, the potential to get sort of emotionally caught up in, sort of zealous or charismatic to an extreme about something, emotionally worked up and inflexible. Sometimes emotions can create within us an intensity of thought and idea that make us like intractable. So I would watch for a little element of maybe fanatical thinking, emotional and intellectual charisma that leads to exaggeration or maybe fanaticism, just as an impulse to watch out for. On the other hand, I think Mercury's square to Saturn can suggest a seriousness, a carefulness, or a quality of mind and thought that is deliberate and mature and thoughtful and structured and disciplined and present and sober, because Mercury, Saturn together often bring out those qualities. Maybe a little bit of the potential for some fanaticism or extremes because of the emphasis on Jupiter in both signs, where things can get a little amplified. And fire and water can also be very emotional and passionate. Mercury square to Saturn can also come out in terms of an inability to think outside of the box. But when Mercury's in the superior position, it's likely that won't last, that Mercury will be able, who's sort of the, whose hallmark is flexibility and movement, that Mercury should be able to come up with a solution for any problems presented by Saturn. Mercury square Saturn may, in these philosophical signs of Jupiter, both Pisces and Sagittarius are some of the more philosophical, religious, spiritual inclined signs of the zodiac because of the rulership of Jupiter, that we might see ways in which we're leaning into our beliefs, that they're aiding us in a difficult moment, that we are utilizing our intuition on some level to work through a serious situation. Hard or difficult or limiting news can come up around Mercury Saturn, just receiving a piece of news or information that's sort of like sobering or difficult. And yet I would trust Mercury in Sagittarius to keep a kind of buoyancy and optimism despite any heaviness. So that's nice. All right. Well, some things to watch for given purely the square from Mercury to Saturn that we're experiencing today. But now I want to talk about 5 things that you can watch for given that this Mercury-Saturn square is part of this larger T-square that's in the process of developing between Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn. Remember that Jupiter-Saturn squares, which I've talked about many times on the channel this past year, have to do with moments where institutions and structures, whether we're thinking of structures or institutions in terms of government or education, or corporations or a field or an industry of some kind, that they go through structural changes when Jupiter and Saturn get together. That's fairly common. We see changes of regime or structure, revisions or shifts in culture and government, and shifts of attitude or outlook within different industries and fields. It's as though there's a period of refinement and structural transformation that occurs in these institutions when Jupiter and Saturn get together. We had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, of course, that was in December of 2021. So if we go back to, here we go. I'm just going to bring this together here. Or was it 2020? Am I off by a year? Yeah, it was 2020. Sorry, I said 2021. Yeah, I always get that mixed up. Okay, so here, let me just show you this on the screen. Here we go. So this was December, the winter solstice, around December 21st of 2020. And there you can see Jupiter and Saturn conjoined in the sign of Aquarius. It's interesting to note that Pluto is going to be occupying that exact same degree while Jupiter and Saturn are squaring, as though there is an echo of the same kind of transition and similar revolutions that are at work between December of 2020 and right now. You could track that, of course, in your own life, in your own birth chart. Look at the connection between, for example, the whole sign house of Aquarius, and especially the places of Pisces and Gemini for some connections there. But so given that we have this unfolding of Mercury engaging the Jupiter and Saturn dynamic between now and the end of December, 5 things to watch for are going to be a shifting of beliefs. Remember, Mercury and Jupiter opposite one another in each other's signs, in their detriments, but mutually receiving one another, but through an opposition, right? It's complex. And that square to Saturn that implies those larger shifts are probably going to be related to a shifting of beliefs. So we could look at this as a time of paradigmatic change, where the change is constant, right? But a shift with respect to your outlook, your beliefs, your ideas, or your thinking, a shifting of belief structures, a shifting of the implications or consequences that your beliefs have on your life. So I would watch for these transits for many of us to be coinciding with an examination, a sort of scrutinizing or reworking of beliefs and almost like philosophical positions that we hold. That would be something to consider between now and the end of the year as some of these things are unfolding. Number 2 would be A new strategy, a new idea, or a new approach. And the implementation, the slow, gradual implementation of new ideas, strategies, approaches to business or relationships or parenting or your own business if you own one, or your craft if you're someone who has a craft, a skill, a trade, a hobby. That transits like these, given the dynamics between all three planets and the Jupiter-Saturn square, could suggest a kind of shift with respect to how you do something, or the idea that leads the way you do something, or a new strategy that you're implementing, or something like that. You have to think of this as a process, and it really also has its seeds in that 0 Aquarius degree that Pluto's at right now as well, which is a fascinating thing to work out in our own charts. The other thing would be, rather than just new strategies, ideas, or approaches, it could be major systematic or structural revisions. Doesn't mean a totally new system. It means major revisions to an existing system, an existing structure. These would typically be informed by a change in idea, approach, value, or philosophy. So, but it could lead to revision rather than implementing something entirely new. That's the point. Number 4 would be conflicts of values or ideas. So, for example, one of the things that is being worked out all of the time in the, let's just broadly call it the legal system, is how we read and interpret the law. How we read and interpret the law will lead to conflicts of value, belief, differing ideas about how the law was intended or how it should be applied within a specific context. I think that's a good analogy to what might come up for us right now when it comes to conflicts of ideas, values, opinions, or beliefs, because those conflicts are probably coming up with respect to how things ought to go forward from here. How should we continue moving forward given this conflict of belief or opinion, belief of strategy or ideal? This is the ideal that I think should take us into the future as a company. This is the ideal I think we should strive for as parents or lovers, or this is the ideal that I'm striving for in my business or my craft or my personal life or my health. And then there might be conflicting ideas or opinions about how to get that done. And so certain conflicts are necessary for us to make larger structural or systematic revisions. It's as though we have to have a debate about something. So you might even I could have labeled this number 4 debates, meaningful debates, conflicts of values or ideas that have to be debated and worked out. And that conversation is important. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of these things were also very dialectical, where we have to work with or look at the tension of various opposites. That's very common for something like Mercury, Jupiter opposite in each other's signs. But those conflicts of idea or opinion about how something was intended, what it means, how it should be interpreted, how something should be used, what is the best use of something, or how do we take this or that and carry it forward? These conflicts are meaningful right now. They're not, I mean, some conflicts we may want to avoid, but some of them are probably meaningful and inevitable. And then number 5 would be about transitions from one era to another, and how do we create the right kind of transition? I think about this a lot as a parent. Oh my God, transition spaces are everything. Everything could be going great, and then there's a car ride that serves as a transition between one thing you're doing and the next thing you're doing, and that car ride can completely sabotage the next thing you're doing if the transition and the car ride transition isn't sort of done thoughtfully. And sometimes there's nothing you can do. But my point is that Jupiter-Saturn squares suggest transitions from one era or period to another, especially within systems or structures, families, government, and social structures or institutions, also relational structures and so forth, mental paradigms. So if there is a transition from one era to the other, how is that transition accomplished? And how is it done while there is conflict surrounding the transition itself, like a car ride that becomes chaotic? Well, it's a transitional space and it becomes a chaotic transitional space. So problem solving and creating meaningful, healthy transitions from one era or system or structure or paradigm to another. That's really a big part of what this is all about. It's interesting to note how diverse those transitions can be from person to person. The people most impacted by this, I would say, are going to be people, for example, that have planets in like the middle of the double-bodied signs. For example, anything right around 15 degrees of Gemini, Pisces, Sag, or Virgo. You got something hanging out right in there. These dynamics, especially, that's about 13, 14 degrees of 13 or 14 degrees of Pisces and Gemini in particular come to my mind. And at those degrees, there's a bit of drama, about 13, 14 double-bodied signs. Remember, if you have planets at 0 degrees of the fixed signs as well, Pluto is going to be contributing by hitting the echo of the last Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at 0 Aquarius. So really meaningful stuff. We'll have a lot more to say about the Jupiter-Saturn square. For now, what I wanted to do today was just lay out the impact of Mercury upon the Jupiter-Saturn square so you have a broader tracking device, because most people, when it comes to Jupiter-Saturn squares, they are subtler. It's a subtle dynamic to track. Collectively, you will often see it just very big. You'll see big transitions in various institutions, government, et cetera. But when it comes to our personal lives, those structural changes, those systematic changes, paradigmatic shifts are not as easy to identify or track, because sometimes we're not paying so much conscious attention to our attitudes, our perceptions, our beliefs, our outlooks, our philosophies. For a lot of us, as some of the ancient philosophers said, if you aren't living an examined life, then the beliefs you have will be shaped unconsciously. And not that we have to be so conscious 24/7. I mean, we just live life. But it's important right now to pay attention to shifting ideas, attitudes, beliefs, and the various structures of our lives and how they are subtly being remade. It's been really fun to track in my own chart, especially looking at the houses of Pisces and Gemini right now, as well as that house of Aquarius where Pluto's entering again. Anyhow, that's it for today. After I sign off, there's an informational video about the upcoming class, the Year 1 program that begins this weekend. It's not too late to register, so be sure to do so. And again, remember, there's need-based tuition for those who need a little bit of help. The informational video after I sign off will tell you all about the program, and I hope to see some of you in class this weekend. All right, take it easy. Bye. Hey, everyone. I'm glad that you're sticking around to hear more about the Year 1 program that's coming up. The program starts on November 16th of this fall, and I am here today to tell you all that the program includes and why I think you really like it if you're thinking about studying astrology. So a few practical details about the course as well. The class begins November 16th, as I mentioned, but it takes place on Saturdays from 12 to about 2 or 3 p.m. Eastern time. So that's 11 to 2 Central, and typically classes are about 2 hours long. Sometimes they run over with Q&A and discussion, but you can always plan for about 2 hours and you won't miss any of the actual lecture content for the day. You may have to duck out a little early if Q&A or discussion is extending. Sometimes it does, which is why we say between 2 and 3 hours, but typically it's around 2. All of the classes are recorded, so if you can't attend live, you are more than welcome to watch the recordings at your own pace and on your own time. You have lifetime access to the recordings, and everything is housed on a student website. I want to actually give you just a little preview of what that student website looks like. So I am going to open up my own version of Thinkific, which is the platform that we use. So here's some of my courses. These are all the Nightlight courses I teach. You can see on the page. But I'm going to tune into, let's go to Nightlight 28, which is the section that began in June of 2024. So here you're going to see that we have orientation instructions, course information, class links, and calendar. Everything that you need to know how to access the course is there, and you'll have a version of this in your own panel that you get set up with when you enroll. And then our lessons are laid out. So lesson 1, we have the video, the audio, the slides, the transcript. We have the Q&A box transcript so you can see what people were saying in the chat box during class. We have flashcards. We have a workbook. We have planet and sign glyph flashcards. We have bonus material, videos that we like from YouTube that we link you to. Say, check this video out, check that video out. They go along with some of the things we talked about in class. So every lesson has material for you to go as far as you want with, but the main thing is the video, audio, slides, transcript, etc. are all listed there so that you can download and watch it on your own time if you can't attend live. Again, the live classes do happen on Saturdays for this cohort, starting November 16th. That is our first day of class. And then going forward, it always meets on Saturdays, and we give you the class schedule to map out. And the breaks that we have, the study sessions that we have, everything's mapped out on the class calendar for you. So those are just a few practical details that, just to kind of start us off with. So I'm going to take you over to the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. And I'm going to share with you some information about the program and sort of walk you through what it includes and what you can expect. So it is an almost year-long program. We typically finish between 10 and 11 months out of the year. It can depend a little bit on some of my teaching and scheduling, because sometimes I teach at conferences and it may delay some of our modules by a week or something like that. But it's typically around 10 to 11 months that the program lasts. So we call it our first year program. At Nightlight, we have a program for absolute beginners. You may want to check that out if you are like brand spanking new. That would be 8 to 10 hours of content that's really meant to set you up for the first year course. We sort of assume that if you're coming into the first year program, you already know a little bit about astrology. For example, you have some familiarity with the signs, planets, and houses. Maybe you know what aspects are, but you want to learn more about what they are. But if you are really at the very total entry level space, then try Astrology for Beginners. And when you take that, you could do that right away and then join the first year course in November, and you'd be perfectly set up for it. But anyhow, in this program, over the course of about a year, we work through 30 lessons that I lead. And those lessons are all 2 to 3 hours each, including lecture, a little break, and a Q&A portion where we open up for people to come on mic and camera and ask questions and have an interactive discussion about the material for the day. The program is broken into modules that cover a variety of topics in ancient Hellenistic astrology. That is the earliest era of horoscopic astrology. And so if you don't know a lot about the different schools of astrology, Hellenistic astrology is going to be the kind of astrology that you see a lot of astrologers practicing nowadays. It's become more popular in the last 30 years or so. And that is due to the fact that a lot of ancient texts with some of the original techniques of horoscopic astrologers were recently translated into the English language, and it's created this renaissance in terms of the use of ancient approaches to astrology. I have a background in modern psychological, archetypal, and evolutionary astrology, and so of course I bring those things to the table, but the course is primarily focused on the excavation of ancient techniques and the spiritual philosophy that ancient astrologers also espoused. The closest thing that I can tell you to what that looks like is, ask this question: do you resonate with the philosophy that you hear me take on my YouTube channel? If so, then you're going to love this course in terms of its philosophical and spiritual approach, because the spiritual approach to astrology that I teach is really at the heart of the program. And that's a big part of my life. I approach astrology from a spiritual standpoint. It doesn't belong to one religion or one particular school of thought, but you will hear me talking about things like the soul, the belief in the transmigration of the soul. You'll hear me talk about the need to be soul-centered in our client approach to counseling in astrology. You'll hear me have an appreciation for psychological dimensions of astrology, but also ancient astrology is really very, very good at developing your predictive capacity. We talk about what kinds of predictions are appropriate, how to make appropriate predictions, how to be the right kind of astrologer for our clients without inducing any fear. So there's a lot of care that goes into the development of this craft. But ancient astrology is really amazing when it comes to honing your predictive abilities. And then what you'll find is in this program, there's also a pretty significant emphasis on the psychological dimensions and client care. Anyhow, we go into the roots of ancient Hellenistic astrology and its techniques in this program, and the 30 classes are broken into modules. We work through the history and philosophy. We work through planets, houses, signs, aspects, essential and accidental dignities. And then we get into approaches to the delineation of natal charts. And then at the end of the program, almost a third of the program is dedicated to live client readings, where you're going to see me meet with a person and apply what we've been studying for an hour-long reading. We take a break, we come back, and then we workshop. How did I do that? Why did I make these choices? How did I handle this or that came up in the reading? And it becomes easily the favorite part for most students of the entire program, because by that point, you've got so much theory that you're really ready to see it put into action. We alternate those live client practice sessions with hands-on practice, where students get to bring chart questions into class that we work on. And that's also something that most people really love. A lot of people will look at the curriculum and say, well, I already know planets, houses, and signs and aspects and dignities. But not if you haven't studied Hellenistic astrology, because the approach that ancient astrologers had to these topics is vastly different from the approach that modern astrologers take. So you will be, in a sense, relearning basic things in a brand new way. And I think a much more enriching, deep, and philosophically clear way. It's really nice to know the why behind things. This program and Hellenistic astrology in general is very good at helping you understand the why behind everything that we do. Also, it's really important to participate when you study astrology in a living lineage. So one of the reasons I don't let people jump ahead to my second or third year programs is because I want you to be entrained to a lineage, a particular way of doing things that comes from an astrologer who has a very living, busy, active practice and who has had teachers themselves. I think that's important for astrological learning. That's the model that my own learning take, and so that's what I really want students to take away from my programs. Anyhow, so all of that aside, the second year program focuses, after we build our understanding of the basic delineation techniques of birth charts, in year 2, we move into timing techniques, which is all about when the karma of a birth chart is going to be active and expressing itself throughout the course of a lifetime. That's year 2. Year 3 focuses on the development of counseling skills at a much deeper level. And then we also have a 1-year horary program, which is about the development of a very specific predictive technique that can be a really amazing tool to add to your kit. That is 4 years worth of training programs that we have. However, I want to mention that many people take our classes just for the sake, purely for the sake of their own personal growth. Taking these programs is very much like being taught how to utilize a technology that for yourself will be deeply useful for the rest of your life, and maybe for close friends or family members around you. Many people come through our programs taking that benefit away. We'll study through all 4 years of our programs with no intention of being professional. This is their hobby. This is a spiritual tool that will have it will pay dividends over a long period of time. However, many people without the intention to practice come into our courses and discover that they're actually good at it and may end up reading for other people part-time. And then there are students who are deeply, intensely motivated to practice for other people. And it is not that our programs really make those people successful. Our programs contribute to your development, but it really is that some people have a calling to practice professionally. And these programs are designed to give you all the tools you need to develop that confidence and to develop a really coherent set of tools and to entrain yourself to a lineage, which you can also develop your own unique style out of. So those are some of the kinds of people that take our programs, you might say. So the 30 classes on the year are then broken into modules. And in between modules, we have 2 course directors who are present in all of the classes, and they lead breakout tutoring sessions where you can come in and review or ask questions about the module that we've just completed, which is usually anywhere between 2 and 3 classes each. So those breakout study sessions led by our tutors are outside of the 30 classes, and very useful. A lot of people like to attend those because they also offer opportunity for community and just lively conversation. We also have 12 online webinar classes led by guest teachers that we host throughout the year. Those are free, and if you can't make them live, they're all uploaded into your student folder. You also have an interactive group forum discussion staffed with tutors who typically respond to questions that you have about the material within 24 hours. So if you can't attend a tutoring session or you just have a random question on a Tuesday night, you can pop it in there and you'll get an answer. We also have a ton of bonus material, optional quizzes, flashcards, tons of supplemental material that is there to help people go as deeply as they want. We have a reading list that is expansive. And that reading list, we don't expect anyone to accomplish. It's more so a resource that we give you saying, here, if you want to know all the things I've read, if you want to know all the things that I love, if you want to know all the things I recommend, here's a master list of everything for each lesson. You could go, PhD level if you wanted to and read thousands and thousands of pages, or you might find that there's just one extra book that looks really interesting and you want to pick it up. But we pride ourselves on making sure you have a ton of resources. You have lifetime access to all the class recordings. You can email our staff or me throughout the year with questions, and my staff will also defer to me in the case that they don't know the answer to a question. So that is what the program includes. It starts November 16th. If you would like to join, at the bottom between now and October 15th, our early bird payments are available. So that saves you some money off the cost of the course. There is a 12-month installment plan that is cheaper than our normal plan, a one-time payment that's significantly cheaper than our normal one-time payment. So you get these little sales that we do until October 15th. We also have need-based tuition assistance. So if you are someone who would like to take this program, but you are on a fixed or tight budget, we have an application there. Click apply now. Just tell us what you need. We give a range. We say between this dollar amount and this dollar amount, what can you spend? And then we set you up with a plan for that tuition number per month. And that is available for anyone. We ask people to apply early because those spots are limited, but we are really accommodating. We try to make sure that nobody's priced out of a spiritual education. Like, this topic should be very accessible for people because I believe that the divine is speaking through the sky, and like anyone should have access to understanding what it's saying, right? So anyway, that is a bit about the program. I hope that this has been useful for you. If there are any questions you have, you can look over the curriculum content on the page, on the year one page. There's more information there. Check out the FAQ section for more questions. Email us info@nightlightastrology.com. And I hope to see some of you in class soon. I think this is going to be a really powerful program because it's also starting right as Pluto's moving into Aquarius. And within the year, we're going to have a Uranus-Pluto trine with Uranus in Gemini. These Aries signatures and the connection between Uranus and Pluto make for a very powerful year to advance our understanding of astrology. So it's a great election year for studying, and I hope to see some of you in class soon.